My first time building with SST was a bit of a disaster, but honestly, classic programmer mistake, it's actually a really, really good dev experience. All right, let's see what we're talking about. Yeah, classic programmer mistake. SST is actually really, really good. Okay, so what we're gonna go over, talk about the mistakes that I made. We're gonna talk about moving away from RDBMS, and then we're gonna talk about the big thing, the big milestone. Muslim AI has been achieved. All right, let's start with mistakes between the chair and the keyboard. The SST team had announced a new console to view the infrastructure scaffolded for your SST app. When you run the SST dev command in the console, it spits out this URL that should be showing what the infrastructure you have scaffolded in your local stacks, right? In your code essentially, right? Infrastructure as code. It's going to show you what's actually been infrastructure so far. It's going to actually deploy it to a stage environment in your particular AWS account. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, all of this is essentially framework-defined infrastructure. I'm not sure if Vercel actually coined this term, where if you deploy an Next.js app with like API routes and a static page and a SSR page, it's actually going to render and create the infrastructure for those, like CDN, Lambda, or Edge function. But essentially, it's doing that, but without the Vercel stuff. So it's amazing. You get AWS primitives from your code directly. Like this is awesome. So all great in theory, especially with the goal of mine learning how to deploy an Next.js app directly with AWS primitives. This is using kind of CDK under the hood. The issue I ran into though was that for me the SST console was stuck in this loading state. I was doing some searching around the Discord. Much love to some folks that were helping me out here, FlexPath, DXP, and J, for trying to add some context. But this is the very confused question that I asked the SST team. New console not loading local. Old console shows deployment info just fine. So this is what I was, at this point, this is kind of what I was seeing. I made no code changes. I just pulled down the standard SST package. There's default standalone code. The new console URL was just stuck on a loading screen. When I went to the old console, it just showed up just fine. I think I have screenshots here, and this is the actual Discord thread I was kind of talking through. So it was just stuck in this loading state. I was trying to get the consoles in here, but old.console.dev worked fine. Very confusing. Okay, so what's going on here? The short of it is, and I'll talk about it here. I'm not sure how I got into this state with the old console, but I'm assuming this is what happened. I had originally created my first SST console account with the AWS CLI on my previous AWS account. I have a few accounts that I've used to manage stuff. And so what happened was the AWS CLI was off to my old account, and then my console was on the old account. So for some reason, it just wasn't showing up locally. I was getting a mismatch there. When I was troubleshooting, I ended up creating a new SST console with the correct AWS account, the new account that I wanted to use. So at this point, my local dev environment and my CLI was still scaffolding code to the old AWS account. So the infrastructure was fine. If I had it signed up correctly with whatever, like if I didn't fuddle around with the UI as much as I did, I might have actually gotten it work out of the box. But in any case, like it was stuck in the console was stuck in the loading state. As soon as I reauthed my AWS CLI with the new Access C, the new console worked just fine. So now, unfortunately, I have some OpenX project in my old AWS account that I have to go roll back at some point, but serverless, so no infra charges. Awesome. So yeah, SST works, and it is a really well-built piece of software. I kind of just summarize this here. Like, I got no one to blame but myself. Turns out the AWS CLI was configured with the wrong account this whole time. That explains why I wasn't seeing anything on the CloudFormation logs. I forgot where specifically I caught that discrepancy of account IDs. I think I might have just seen it in the console in some of the lines of code. Like, that looks like an account ID. That's not the account ID that I expected. So that I just gave that debugging attempt a shot, and that ended up being the issue. So this is great. The console shows exactly what I was hoping for. I'm not going to see any logs because I'm not actually using the Lambdas. I'm just using OpenNext. So all the server logs are essentially happening locally. But it's great. All my resources are here. You see the Next.js site. I had this DynamoDB table, which we'll talk about later. So yeah, big shout out to FlexPath, DXP, and Jay, for the support here. This is awesome. So the big one, moving away from RDBMS in a serverless world. My friendship has ended with Postgres. When I'm building serverless apps, DynamoDB is my friend. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I love tables. SQL is my homie. Postgres, foreign keys. I love all of that. But really, in a serverless context, it's just the wrong tool. Furthering my journey into SST land, I was like making a few realizations from my original post when I originally scaffolded out what I wanted to do for Ask-A-Dane. Postgres and PG Vector gets you RAG out of the box. You can just throw vectors at it, store it in the DB, use the stored SQL procedure to go ahead and query for the KNN, K nearest neighbors, and then you've got RAG out of the box. Really straightforward. The problem is trying to actually deploy this to a production environment where you expect multitudes of users to actually engage with it. That's when it kind of breaks down. Although you can use RDBMS using AWS Aurora, right? So they do have a serverless offering. Few issues here. Obviously, at minimum, you need to run 2 auto-scaling units. And then, when you compare it to just a serverless native NoSQL solution, the queries are much slower and they're much more expensive. And it takes a long time to scale up those auto-scaling units if I do expect a big surge in demand. I mean, that's kind of why I've decided to use serverless. I want on-demand pricing. I don't want to just pay for infrastructure that keeps running. It's a bit of a philosophical difference. Technically, obviously, you can accomplish both between serverless and a serverful approach, but I'm just using serverless. So for this particular use case, it doesn't quite make sense to keep on with the serverful approach. There's also off-the-shelf solutions like Supabase, but for the amount of data that I need to actually run this AI app, I can't use the free tier. Sorry, I'm cheap. I can't justify, spending $25 a month forever while I host this app. But to be fair, you do get serverless Postgres out of the box with Supabase. So I just kind of jot down some of the metrics here. It's like 6 cents per ACU hour, minimum of 2 ACUs of the Aurora cluster units. And the 5 to 50 second scale up time for AWS Aurora. Okay, maybe not the most ideal. And then Supabase, serverless Postgres, but I have to pay $25 a month forever. This kind of goes against the philosophy of serverless on-demand pricing. So, obviously, like for SST, DynamoDB is the default table, and it comes with a pre-built construct. That's super easy to set up that primitive and get it up and running. There is a bit of a learning curve, for me, especially coming from a relational world over into a NoSQL world, of how to actually model my data in a single table. Luckily, it's not too hard. There's lots of resources online to figure this out, especially around single table design, especially with getting started with DynamoDB, especially with like my scenario, moving from relational to NoSQL. They've got some recommendations in the docs to go with something like ElectroDB, which felt really great for me on the surface. It's giving me a schema, it's giving me a nice ORM style, interface in the code to actually do basic CRUD. But my problem is that for a first-time NoSQLer, I want to go as close to the primitives as I can. ElectroDB sets up a lot of these like indices and stuff for you just automatically, and it's doing a lot of like work under the hood to actually generate those DynamoDB calls, especially for a first timer in DynamoDB land. I think the learning is just a lot more efficient if you just go directly with the primitive. There's this concept of a 200% problem where with going with ElectroDB, first of all, I have to understand 100% of how DynamoDB is actually working, how it's creating the records, how it's fetching them, how it's doing searches. And then in addition, I have to learn how ElectroDB is translating all that into their particular ORM code. It's kind of the same issue with using ORMs, like with SQL databases. Like you have to learn the ORM nuances, and then as well as you have to just know SQL anyway. That what I can do with regards to joins and whatnot. So again, the same philosophy here is like I'm just gonna make the direct call to DynamoDB and get it out of the way. And last one on NoSQL and single table design. It's not the default way to structure relational databases, but lots of folks have taken this approach, especially when trying to move quick. Here's this Levels.io tweet that it basically says, I'm essentially doing, I just have one table in my database. Really straightforward. Like for his reason is the less risk of corrupting, a less risk of corrupt DB killing everything. Okay, sure. Reddit also has talked about this, as far as like developer velocity, just put one table, put everything in there. And then later, I believe they migrated over to a NoSQL database. I forgot the actual developer blog where they mentioned this. Obviously, if I type in Reddit, NoSQL single table, it's just a bunch of questions about, no single tables. But they did have a blog post, if I remember correctly. Yeah, there is just the bit of work is actually learning how to structure your primary and sort keys, but I actually found this to be, you can take a really nice evolutionary approach to it. The common con that a lot of folks have with NoSQL is that it requires lots of advanced data modeling before you can actually get going. I didn't find this to be true, but maybe I will, we'll see. But I found that actually it's pretty intuitive to kind of think about it in an evolutionary way. So, the big milestone. We have achieved Muslim AI with retrieval augmented generation. I've got this demo here that you can see. I got this running on my local host. What is Salat? There's that streaming AI. There is the closest KNN matching ayat with that particular prompt. Amazing work. All of this is scaffolded super quickly, but it's great to actually get some form, once all the differentiated work was out of the way, to get to actually what I was looking for. So got my infrastructuring, my data store is storing data. All that undifferentiated plumbing out of the way, finally able to get some actual progress on the novel bits of this project. One of my main objectives was to get the RAG to work with the Quran and the Hadith, and I've already tackled half of it. So all of this is working on a UI built off of Vercel's AI SDK, and they have an Next.js chatbot starter. So it's nothing revolutionary here. A few things went into this demo here. I actually used Pinecone for my serverless vector DB. I know we just talked about DynamoDB, but I switched to Pinecone for a few reasons. I'll get into why. OpenAI is being used to actually generate the embeddings for that prompt, and then querying against Pinecone to get the KNN, the K nearest neighbor matching ayat. And then Vercel AI SDK, like I mentioned, gets me the streaming, gets me some nice UI React hooks, and scaffolds up basically the basic Next.js stuff that I need. So the easiest to explain is why OpenAI. I listed this in the original Ask Dean post. Nothing changed here. Good APIs, good docs, lots of community support. For the time being, I don't see a need to host my own model, fine-tune it, and then go that route. OpenAI just seems to work just fine. Okay, so why Pinecone? I had originally wanted this project to be 100% SST, 100% AWS primitives, keep it all in one place, keep it simple. To that end, I was really trying to leverage this AWS OpenSearch service. Essentially, it's Apache Lucene under the hood, and it mentions that there is some serverless features. There is some vector search capacity. So okay, let me just give this a shot. What a nightmare of experience, truly. So they had a talk in AWS reInvent, right? This one here. 0 ETL integration with DynamoDB. I say, oh, perfect. I can just store all of my Quran ayat and embeddings into DynamoDB, get this 0 ETL stuff figured out, and I get vector search all in AWS. This is exactly what I was looking for. Okay, 0 ETL, sure, but this is what 0 ETL actually means. So obviously, first, reasonable. You got to configure a serverless OpenSearch collection, right? So you go into AWS console or CLI, whatever, you got to do that yourself. You can use CDK. SST doesn't support a construct for OpenSearch out of the box yet, but alas, you got to do that. Okay, not very 0 ETL, guys. You got to have me set up a pipeline to ingest data from DynamoDB. Okay, understandable, reasonable. What it does essentially is it takes in DynamoDB, it drops it in some S3 intermediary, and then Apache Lucene, or the OpenSearch, is pulling that in, ingesting it, and setting it up on the OpenSearch side. Okay, there's some few services there that they don't mention that you got to set up IAM roles for. Their docs are good, but sometimes they're just like incomplete. So they've set it up for, they haven't set it up fully for serverless. So I have to like look at CloudFormation logs, see what the hell is erroring out, add that back into IAM. A nightmare, hassle. like 10 hours of my life was going just for these steps. Okay, you got your data flowing. Now you have to properly index the correct embedding column. You can't just throw it and it figures out like, okay, that's clearly your embedding column. No, you have to like tell open source, like, this is the column I want you to index on. Okay, and then last, obviously, you get all that done. I'm on this last step. You have to learn how to query OpenSearch. Basically, how to query with Apache Lucene. Yeah, that's where I called it quits. I threw in the towel at this point. I'm like, I'm not learning yet another thing to get this search done. So at that point, I'd already kind of spent 10 hours hacking away at this. But of course, as I do, I reach out to my friends for advice when I'm kind of feeling stuck. So while I was plugging away, a friend had mentioned Pinecone. So when I hit that roadblock with OpenSearch queries, gave Pinecone a try. In 2 hours, I was able to get 10 IOT uploaded into Pinecone, into their serverless vector DB. They've already got an offering that supports this use case out of the box. I was able to just quickly test a prompt, generate an embedding with OpenAI, and then right away, I got my cosine similarity, KNN vector search. Alhamdulillah. It worked in like 2 hours. So this is how it looks like. I was able to get all of that in there. You see my indexes here, Quran search, 1536 dimensions. It's all in there. All my 6,236 ayat of the Quran. It's amazing. And then the last one on OpenSearch is that the billing is weird. It's super expensive. I was at $0. You know, basically I have some like CloudFront, CDN, S3, like very, very little usage before this project. When I started using OpenSearch, just from attempting to set up the pipeline, I got $3 a charge on my account for this month. I mean, if that's what it takes to actually get this set up, you know, who knows how expensive this would have gotten when I actually deployed to production. I mean, look how simple it was getting this into Pinecone. Obviously, you just like, you know, this upstart Quran ayat that basically calls, so let's actually jump into it. This is in parse, it's actually up here, parse Quran embeddings, right? The upstart Quran ayat, this is it. It's this many lines of code, 12 lines of code. You basically point it to the index, right? This is just that Quran search that we saw earlier. Create the parameters. You have your metadata, which has this particular type. You know, we got the ayat, the absolute ayat. There's some, you know, metadata, pretty usual stuff. And then you just call, you know, good old upsert, and it takes care of that for you. You just throw those arrays in. It's super simple. It's really, really straightforward. You know, this is where the actual embeddings are coming in from. Embedding response comes from OpenAI. You know, you throw the Quran text in there, spits out the embeddings, and then, you know, you just pass it over into that upsert function. It just throws it into the DB. Super straightforward. So yeah, since it's a monorepo, I just set the getters and setters. I've got the entirety of the Quran already locally set up as a single .parquet file. So with the simple like TypeScript scripting, I was basically able to use Parquet.js and just step through the entirety of the Quran, all those 6,236 ayat, call OpenAI like we're doing here to generate the embeddings, and then upsert them over into Pinecone. And so using a single script, you know, about 20 minutes later, it's done. I've got all the ayat already in there, right? Like this is such a breeze, such a better developer experience, and the costs are just significantly cheaper because they've infrastructured things better probably than I could have. It's just way more efficient and cheaper to actually get this going, and they have a nice serverless on-demand pricing as well. So that cost is also taken care of. Okay, last thing, why Vercel AI SDK? I thought we're all open next. 80% of the work for the chatbot like this is already done. Like this demo, it's all done off of the Next.js starter. Authorizations figured out. They've already got the streaming stuff built in. Like let's actually take a look at what came out of the box. So chat route. So this was basically set up already. Most of this was there. This is the stuff that I'm adding, right? The system message, right? The custom prompting. This RAG is added. This is the actual fetching function that's grabbing the matching ayat. Again, super simple. Pinecone index.query. And you just tell it how many results you want. So all this is custom. But all the stuff that came out of the box is from here downwards. The stream opens up the stream for you, returns it. Let's go into a page. Yes, this chat function, AI SDK. There you go. Use chat, right? AI/React. It comes with the messages, the log that's already there. Has an append function that triggers the API again. Comes with data. This is what I'm using to send back the matching results so I can render this nice UI for the surahs that are returned. So this is the OpenAI streaming, and this is the nice data that's formatted. It's a message. You just use the hook, append it, and then the UI is already built. So again, I think it pays a lot of dividends to just clear away any of those undifferentiated aspects of the project to get to the real value, building out the novel bits of a particular project. So for this case, it's the retrieval augmented generation, it's the Quran, it's the database, it's the Hadith. And the Vercel AI SDK works out pretty well. It's actively being developed. It's built using all the latest Next.js features. There's a lot of good tailwinds to use this project to scaffold this up. There is a bit of differences here, right? We got to get rid of the edge runtime function. So although AWS has this Lambda at edge, and I believe OpenNext already supports this, for this particular use case, since we're doing a lot of data work, you actually get worse performance when you deploy to the edge, because what's happening is that the Lambda at the edge is closer to the user, but it's having to do a longer round trip to grab the data and fetch it back to the particular user. So it's more efficient for the user to just make a call directly closer to the data center, closer to where the data lives, and then sending back the data. So for this case, I just got rid of that. The Vercel AI starter kit came with it deployed on the edge. It's just a single line. You just walk it back. It's pretty straightforward. A bit more work to handle environment variables. So Vercel uses the .env.local setup, and it has its own secrets manager. So what we have to do here is, if I go into Ask Stack, basically just rip out all those env variables that are in that .env.local, and you throw it into the SST construct for the secrets manager. So what is next? Fine-tune those system prompts. Make sure that the responses are actually useful. It's not just like dropping a wall of text to the actual users. We're going to layer in DynamoDB into those actions like we saw it in order to get the sharing of the chats and saving of the users and all that stuff. We're going to add some more auth providers. So right now I just have it wired in with GitHub. We'll obviously add some things that's like that real people use, like Facebook and Google Auth. We have to upload the Hadith because we already finished the Quran. Now we got to do the Hadith next. And then obviously we got to do some paywall integrations. We got to monetize this app. So that'll be coming up as well. But that's it. SST is actually really good.